welcome to the fourth episode of We Are Milton, a podcast brought to you by the City of Milton. The goal of the podcast is to bring you information about all things related to Milton, Wisconsin. So we're talking about parks and recreation, volunteer opportunities, community events, and more. I'm Inga Cushman, Administrative Services Director for the City of Milton. And with me today is Dave Bendlin.
Hello.
He is a retired biology and environmental sciences teacher with the Milton High School, and he's also a member of the Rock County Conservationists.
Thank you for having me here today.
Yeah. How long were you a teacher?
I taught at Milton High School for 33 years.
33 years.
I still continue to teach a summer school class for 5th and 6th graders called Field Biology, where every day the students go outside, catch frogs and turtles and snakes and crayfish, and it's so much fun to be able to work with children outdoors.
Where do you go to do those things?
All the places around here, but including some very local ones such as Storrs Lake, Otter Creek, the Stormwater Pond, or Lawton Pond it's called,
Okay.
over at the other side of town. And
In the dog park,
in
right?
the dog park,
Yep.
yes, that's right.
Okay,
Yep.
great. And every year, Dave is really great, and he helps the Parks and Recreation Commission with the annual seed collection at Crossridge Park. Crossridge Park, over the last 15 years, probably,
I think so, and maybe more.
the Parks and Recreation Commission has been working to establish a natural prairie there. And Dave has also been working with the Parks and Recreation Commission on establishing a prairie in Tower Hill Park, the natural detention area, I guess,
It's
right
a,
behind
it's a
that
stormwater
park.
basin. It was actually created specifically to be a spot to handle stormwater runoff for the subdivision in that area.
Okay. Yeah, so those areas are really great to see natural prairie life. And like I said, Dave's been helping the Parks and Recreation Commission on those endeavors, and he's been a big source of knowledge for us to be able to do that. So I asked Dave here today to talk to us a little bit about natural prairies and different things that you can see in a natural prairie and why they're important.
Good. Well, I'm happy to talk about those things. They're very interesting to me.
Good. So can you tell us just some typical characteristics of a natural prairie for this region?
So prairies are considered to be a grassland habitat. The technical definition is usually that there are less than 2 trees per acre. Much of the part of Wisconsin that we live in before settlement also had a type of mixed grassland oak tree habitat called savanna. But some parts of Rock County, for example, the area called Rock Prairie down near Johnstown, was one of the largest prairies in the state of Wisconsin. Much of that has now become farmland, but there are still here and there throughout Rock County several native prairie remnants, some of which are protected, others of which unfortunately are still being developed. And there's been a real interest amongst corporate and private landowners to restore some of those and put in prairie plantings like the City of Milton has done on some of its parks.
So how can you tell what you're looking at is a prairie? I know you talked about the less than 2 trees per acre.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other distinctive characteristics that you didn't mention?
Well, typically, as you might expect, it's dominated by tall grasses.
Okay.
Look also for the presence of wildflowers that bloom all summer long. And even if you're not familiar with the types of wildflowers that bloom there, a lot of them appear to be similar to sunflowers, so that's another thing to look for. But particularly that extended bloom, typically starting from the end of May and going all the way through till frost.
Oh, wow.
There's always something blooming on a prairie.
Okay, that's great. Good information. So are there different types of prairies? I know I've heard of wet and dry.
So there are, and in fact, the scale is generally considered to be 3. There's wet, medium, and dry. The prairie that has been established at Tower Hill Park, which is a stormwater containment basin, is a pretty good example of a wet prairie. You'll see some prairie wildflowers growing in there that you wouldn't see, for example, over at the Crossridge Park prairie. A medium prairie would be typical of what you would see, and it would be what most people would plant in their yard or a flower garden. And then the dry prairies are typically on real sharp, steep hilltops or areas that have real sandy, gravelly soil. Those would be pretty rare in the Milton area, but there are other places around the Rock County where you can find those.
Okay. And just to give people a little bit of information too. So Tower Hill Park, you can access that off of East St. Mary Street. There's the playground there. And then Crossridge Park is accessible from Brown Drive and Parkview Drive.
Yes.
Parkview Drive, you have to walk along the trail a little bit to get to that natural prairie area, but it's still accessible from both of those locations.
Yes. And if you're not familiar with the Tower Hill one, as Inga mentioned, look for the playground off of St. Mary Street and walk through the playground, and then you'll see some mowed paths that go through the prairie there.
So we've talked a little bit about the different plant life that you might see there. Are there specific animals or insects that are really native to native prairies?
Sure. I suppose the classic thing that people would think of with a prairie would be things like buffalo or prairie dogs. Well, of course, you're not going to see those kind of things here in Milton. But you will see some of the bird life, and some of those are things that prairies can provide valuable habitat for. Meadowlarks, for example, are a bird that's kind of on the decline. They nest on the ground in tall grasses, and so prairies provide them that important habitat. But for most people, the prairies here in Milton would be just a wonderful place to go to see insects, especially butterflies. Mm-hmm. Right now in the Tower Hill prairie, it is just filled with monarch butterflies visiting all the different flowers that are in bloom. And so it's very nice to see it just for that. We have had, at different times of the year, there have actually been sandhill cranes that have stopped in there briefly. Great blue heron sometimes feeds on frogs that it finds in the wetter spots of the field. So those are just some typical examples of what people might see.
Great. And I'll let Dave have a drink of water here quick, because
Thank you.
think you were trying to before. There's a lot of different areas in Milton that we've been working to establish the prairie. So we've talked about Crossridge Park and Tower Hill, but there's also some locations that are difficult for the city to mow along the Highway 26 bypass and some other areas. So allowing a natural prairie to grow there reduces those mowing costs, but it also beautifies the area as well. So that's kind of some of our goals related to prairies from a city perspective.
And this is an important idea that you've brought across. Prairies are, in the long run, much less maintenance than caring for a typical lawn. Mm-hmm. You don't have to mow them. You don't have to fertilize them. It may take a little bit of work to get them established initially, putting down the seed and then controlling some of the annoying weeds that can pop up in the first couple of years. But once it's well established, it's largely weed-free, and the only maintenance that is done is to either mow it or burn it, typically, at least once a year, to remove the old dead plant material so that the new plant material can grow up unhindered by that. We are fortunate in that Milton is one of the few cities in our area that still allows people to do burns like that on their property.
And you will see city crews fairly often. What is it?
Once a year.
Once a year, burning some of the different prairie areas in the city. So if you see those burning operations happening, that's what's happening. They're trying to maintain those natural prairie areas that we've worked to establish.
And I would caution, if anybody thinks that they want to do a burn or they want to establish a prairie, there are protocols that you have to follow. You have to notify the Milton Fire Department and give them the location and time that you're going to be doing it. And then you also need to contact the Rock County non-emergency line, not 911, but and let them know, and they'll ask you to tell where the location, how long you're going to be burning, and then they'll ask you to call back when you're finished. That way, if somebody drives by and sees the fire and they make the mistake of calling it in as an emergency, they know ahead of time that it's not.
That's good information to know, too.
Yep.
So I know that with prairies, you collect the seeds from there, too. Is there a good time to do that during the year?
It depends upon which plants you're trying to collect, but for most of the prairie wildflowers, this is the time of the year to collect seeds. We probably have already missed seed collection time for some of the things that flowered back at the end of May or June. But for the bulk of prairie wildflowers, which flowered during midsummer and still are flowering now, collecting in typically mid to late October allows you to collect a wide variety of seeds from quite a few different species.
That's great. So after you collect the seed, is there a process to make them be able to plant them?
There is. First of all, you want to store the seeds in paper bags in a clean, dry place. You don't want to store them in anything like a plastic bag, where especially if you collected them, they might have been a little bit damp. Then the seeds could get moldy and they'd be non-viable. You wouldn't be able to grow anything from them. So typically a garage is a good place, or maybe in a basement. If you have a backyard shed, that's a good place. You want to store them in some place where they actually do get exposed to freezing temperatures. Most prairie seeds need to be exposed to a period of cold weather in order for them to germinate the next spring. So you wouldn't want to store them indoors, for example, where they'd be heated.
Perfect.
Anything else about that part?
No.
Okay.
That's really great information to know. So is there a perfect time to plant a prairie if you're planning to do one in your yard somewhere?
Ideally, the best time to plant a prairie is in the fall.
Okay.
I know that sounds odd because I think most people are used to planting a garden typically in the spring. But what you would want to do, if it's possible, is to clear off the area that you want to put the seeds down. You could do that by simply mowing it as low as possible right to the ground. But even better would be if you could burn the area where you plan to put the seeds down this fall. And typically that ends up being in early to mid-November. If you wait longer than that, we might get into some wet or even snowy weather that would prevent you from accomplishing a burn. And then right away on the bare ground that you've exposed by either mowing or burning, put down the seeds that you collected this fall. That gives the seeds a better chance to make contact with the soil, and it allows them to experience that period of cold and wet during the winter that helps them germinate the following spring.
Okay.
If you were to put the seeds down in spring, like you would think of with most gardens, they wouldn't germinate until the next spring.
Okay.
Because they would need to go through that period of winter, cold, and wet.
Okay. Good information. So the Parks and Recreation Commission hosts an annual prairie seed collection at Crossridge Park, and that's typically held on the third Saturday in October from 10 a.m. to noon. And during that time, residents, visitors, anybody, they can come and Dave will be there and help direct you on which seeds to collect and how to collect them. And then if you do have any additional questions about prairies, he'll be there to answer those as well. We do encourage people to come. Anyone who's interested in learning about prairies or just experiencing that, we'll be meeting probably around that Brown Drive entrance to Crossridge Park at 10 a.m. on October 19th this year.
Yes.
That'll be the day that we'll be there.
And if you are unable to attend on this day, that day rather, on the 19th of October, I'm also offering another date to collect, which is the previous Saturday, October 12th, and that will be at Tower Hill Park off of St. Mary Street, and again, from 10 a.m. till noon.
Is that with the Rock County Conservationists?
That's with the Rock County Conservationists, but that's a free, open to the public program. And the big advantage in collecting your own seed, you can hire a prairie company. There are a couple here in the Milton area, Tall Grass Restorations, and there's another one called Midwest Prairies. They'll come in and plant a prairie for you if you'd like to have it all the work done for you. But it's an expensive process, and you should be prepared to pay a good price for a job well done. Mm-hmm. If you can't afford it, by collecting seed on your own, you can save yourself a lot of money.
That's great.
Yep.
And so you have two really great opportunities in October to not only learn about the prairies, but also collect your own seed.
Yes.
And help establish those natural habitats in your own backyard.
And it's a volunteer opportunity, too. We have had scout troops, church groups show up and help collect the seed, and then they don't intend to use the seed themselves. They turn and donate it back to the city to help seed some of these areas that Inga's spoken about. But you're completely welcome to take as much seed as you can collect and take it for your private use.
Great. And for those who attend, what do you recommend bringing or wearing?
Well, it's pretty important, long pants, depending on the warmth of the day, A long sleeve shirt might be in order, or a shirt where you can roll up the sleeves if it's a little
Layers,
bit warm.
maybe.
It depends. We've had some days where it's cold and you need a stocking cap and gloves and everything, and then there have been other days in October where it's been quite warm. So be dressed for whatever the weather is, but I would say long pants are essential. A pair of gloves. They can be simple cotton work gloves or a pair of thin leather gloves. Some of the seed heads are a little bit spiny, for example, like purple coneflower. It's not a seed where you want to try to pick the seed head barehanded. And if you have a pair of garden clippers to help you cut off some of those seed heads and put them in there. And then we recommend that you collect in the seed into a paper grocery bag, or maybe you have the big empty bags that bird seed comes in for your bird feeder. Those work very well. Just remember, you want it to be some sort of bag that breathes, a paper bag or a mesh bag, something like that, not plastic.
Okay. So is there anything else with prairies that we haven't covered that you think would be important for people to know?
Just mostly the idea that they are a wonderful alternative to lawns.
Mm-hmm.
We did touch on that a little bit. I mean, much less work to maintain, far more beneficial in attracting wildlife, and not just the insects, but all sorts of birds and things. So, if you're a person who enjoys seeing wildlife, a prairie planting is a far better way to attract wildlife than a lawn.
Okay. So, as always, as we're wrapping things up, please feel free to contact me with any topic suggestions that you may have for future podcasts. Dave, do you have any topic suggestions?
I can think of one, but because my wife and I have a real interest in gardening, a possible future topic might be gardening for wildlife, and perhaps we could even incorporate it with a tour of our yard, a video tour.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I would love to do that. We just
Okay.
need to figure out technology and how to make that work.
Yep.
So thanks to everyone for listening to our 4th episode of We Are Milton. I hope things are getting a little bit more interesting, especially when we bring in special guests to talk with us about interesting topics too. Special thanks to Dave for taking the time out of your day to come in and talk with us about prairies.
You're welcome. It was a very nice opportunity.
Good. I appreciate it. So our podcast is officially on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and I also post this video version on YouTube as well. So we hope to see you at the Prairie Seed Collection. Again, it's on October 19th with the Parks and Recreation Commission from 10 to noon. But then also Dave and the Rock County Conservationists are hosting another one at Tower Hill Park from 10 a.m. to noon on October 12th.
That's correct.
Perfect. And you can check out the city's website for more information about the Parks and Recreation one on the 19th and the Facebook page. And then, Dave, if someone wants more information about the October 12th event, is there a location they should go to?
Yes. There's a website on Facebook, or a page on Facebook, the State Line Area Conservation Coalition.
Okay.
That is a site where various conservation groups, the Green Rock Audubon Society, the Welty Environmental Center, and the Rock County Conservationists post notices of their public programs. So that would be something worth checking out, particularly if you enjoy nature hikes and that sort of thing.
Perfect. Maybe we'll have to talk about some of those events later.
Okay.
Well, and as always, we're going to end with, ready? 1, 2, 3.
We are Milton.